Okay, in this lesson what we're going to do is we're going to go over some of the more common CSS properties and values that you can use with text. And this is not comprehensive, but it is going to be, some of the more common ones, kind of some of the fun ones we'll do. So to start out, I have a basic HTML document here. I have an H1, an H3, a paragraph, and a link. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you real quick what that looks like on the browser. Pretty straightforward. And I will talk you through some of the properties we can apply for this. So going back here, and I'm going to use a combination of inline and embedded styles just to, mix it up and give you more examples of those as we go through. So let's start with the font family property. This allows you to change the font face. Before we do that, let me talk just a little bit about fonts. There are three types of fonts. There are serifed fonts, like Times New Roman, that have decorative little whirligigs on the end of the fonts. Those are the serifs. And then there are the sans serif fonts, like Helvetica and Arial. This is Arial right here. Notice there's no base or feet on the font holding it up. It's pretty straightforward and clean. Just to talk about briefly some of this font information. If you're looking for a more traditional look, maybe a more old-fashioned look, you would probably want to go with a serif font. If you want something modern and cleaner, you would want to go with a sans serif font. And the reason I tell you that is because I'm just going to talk you through choosing some fonts. One additional thing I have to tell you is when you designate a font, what it tells the browser to do is go check the operating system of the person that's viewing the file and see if they have that font installed. There are some common fonts across most computers that you probably want to stick to. When you get into the decorative fonts, the ones that are 3D fonts and things like that, they're going to be less commonly installed. So you can designate them as the font that you would prefer, but you have to realize that a lot of times those fonts won't be installed on your user's computer. So let's go ahead and change the paragraph. I'm going to use an inline style. So I'm going to say style is going to be equal to font-family. And you can actually provide multiple fonts. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that I want to change our font face to Arial. But if that doesn't work, I'm going to put a comma in and I'm going to say, why don't you check for Helvetica next to see if they have that. And if that doesn't work, go ahead and show my text in whatever their computer's default sans serif font is. So it's kind of like a checklist. It tries Arial. If it doesn't have success, it goes to Helvetica. If not, then it goes ahead and defaults. But it will go through this list until it finds a match. So just real quick, I'm going to save that and watch the paragraph here. It's going to go from the default of Times Roman in my browser to Arial. So that's font family. It's the same thing as highlighting something in Word and choosing the font from the drop-down font list. Alright, so let's go ahead and work on font size. I'm also going to go ahead and add this to the P tag. I'm going to change font family to font-size. And there are a bunch of different ways you can designate the font size. The more common one that we're used to because we use Word so much is the point. So 16 point, 32 point, we all kind of know what that means. But there are some other ways you can do it. You can give it in pixels, which is the number of dots on the screen that it takes to make up the font. If you're preparing something for print, you might designate your font size in centimeters and inches and millimeters. There are some other words that are less common. There are some keywords that give relative sizes from XX-small through XX-large. So what we're going to do though is we're going to stick with probably what's most common to most of us. We're going to set this to a 32 point size. That's a very large font. You probably wouldn't use it for a paragraph, but I'm doing it just for demonstration purposes. So we save that. We go back to our browser. We reload, and as you might suspect, there is our giant 32 point font. Alright, so let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that just so it doesn't take up so much screen size. I'm limited in the amount of real estate I have here while I'm doing my demonstrations. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out. And I'm going to go ahead and do an inline style for this next one. embedded styles. Embedded styles aren't probably the most useful thing since we only have one of each element, but just to show you how it works, I'm going to go up to the style. I'm going to redefine the now let's just do the paragraph again. I'm going to redefine the paragraph tag, and I'm going to set a style on that using font weight. Now, there are a couple of options for values on this, but we're just going to go ahead and talk about using bold. That, as you might suspect, is going to bold the text in our paragraph. So again, the size will go down because I removed that style, and it should be replaced with bold text. Again, there are other options on some fonts. They have different weights of bold built in. Sometimes you can use bold, bold, or boldest, things like that. But a lot of the fonts that are designed today don't have that built in, so it's not very useful. Okay, moving along, let's go ahead and redefine our H3, and we're going to use a new style this time called the font variant. And what font variant allows you to do is to use what's called small caps. It takes a normal case, when I talk about case, capital T, lowercase HIS, not only the form of the file but the relationship of the file from capital to non-capital letters. What font variant allows us to do is to put things into what's called small caps. So it will change the shape of all the letters to capital letters, but it will still maintain a slight size difference between uppercase and lowercase letters. So let me show you what that looks like. Remember, we're doing this on our H3 using an embedded style. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to the browser, reload that, and here is our small caps. My computer froze there for a minute, so I'm not sure if there was a pause or not. So this right here is our small caps. Notice the capital T is a little bit bigger than the capital HIS in the word this. So again, something you might want to do just to get a little bit of difference, to put some contrast between these H1s. This looks different than this text does here just because of the case. Alright, so going back to our document, let's go to the next one. We can do text transform. I'm going to go ahead and do text transform on our H1. And text transform actually has quite a few values that we can use. Text transform, you can use uppercase, which puts everything in uppercase letters, even though it wasn't typed that way originally in the HTML. You can use uppercase, lowercase, and then there's capitalize, and capitalize allows you to follow normal capitalization rules. It capitalizes the first letter of each word. We don't use it that much because it doesn't follow standard English capitalization. For example, if I have a title that says, in this case, howdy there, or welcome to my page, it might be a better example. The words, if we applied capitalize, the words to would be capitalized automatically, whereas in normal English we wouldn't capitalize the to in welcome to my page. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to text transform our H1 to uppercase. And even though it is typed in the HTML in mixed case, when I save this and go reload it, it will automatically change howdy there into uppercase and save me a little time. This is useful if you are copying and pasting stuff from another source and maybe want to change the case of it. Alright, so going back, let's talk about text decoration. Text decoration again has multiple options on it. I'm going to go ahead and stick with our H1 here. And some of the values that we can give to text decoration include underline, overline, line through, blink, and none. And I'm going to talk about a couple of these real quick. You need to be careful when you use underline because people see underlining on a web page and they automatically think link. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to add an underline to our H1. And it's not the best idea because people might think it's a link, try to click on it, and nothing's going to happen. Overline, I've never used overline. Line through actually draws a line through your text, and this can be useful if you're showing edits on a document. The old thing is line through, the new change might be in a different color and not line through. You can also have that infomercial effect of, you know, the price is $29.95, but wait, line through. If you order now, then you get it for $19.95 or something like that. So you might use it to show the old price. Blink, I don't want you to use it. A lot of browsers don't support it, even though it is standard CSS, because people find it so annoying. So I encourage you not to use blink as a text decoration. Now, text transform and text decoration both have the option of none, and this kind of worries people in the beginning. Why would you have a none option for one of these? Why would you set a style and set it to none? And the reason is a lot of times it's very useful in inline styles to override an embedded or a linked style. So let's say that I had 16 H1s on this page and I text transformed them all to uppercase, but there was just one on the page that I didn't want in uppercase for some reason. I could then use an inline style of text transform set to none, and it would cancel out the embedded or the linked style in this case. So a lot of times your none option is an escape option for you. So let's go ahead and add our text decoration option. We're going to go ahead and add underline for this. I'm going to save it and go back to the browser and show you why this is useful. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do one more text transform. And this is actually a very common use of none when using the text decoration. I'm going to redefine our A tag. Remember, we have a link on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say text decoration none. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to remove the default underline off of the A tag. Remember, your browser always underlines the link. If for some reason I don't want the underline on the link, what I can do is cancel that out by text decoration none. So I save that. We go back to our browser. Notice go to Yahoo, which is our link, is automatically underlined. But when I reload it and apply that new style, it retains the color, but it doesn't require the underline. And so that actually is used fairly often. A lot of people like it. It's a little bit cleaner looking, but it does take away a little bit of the usefulness of the page because people have to kind of, do a little bit of extra looking to recognize links. All right, so let's talk just about a couple more that you might use for decorative purposes, for shock value, I'm not sure. But I'm going to go ahead and take these out of the H1 to show you a couple more. We're going to do word spacing. And word spacing allows me to increase or decrease the default amount of space between words. So what we could do is we could stretch them out. Our H1 that says howdy there, let me change that real quick, maybe make it a little bit more useful. Welcome to my page. So if we want more space between that, we're going to give it in the same measurements that we did when we were setting the font size. So we can use pixels, we can use points and things like that. If you want to move it on the space, a lot of people like to use pixels. So let's say I want to put 50 pixels between each word. When I save that, you'll see the effect of that in our H1. And so, well, it's not going to show, we'll change the words, but welcome to my page, 50, 50, and 50 pixels. And you can decrease that to put things closer together, but again, it just gives you a little bit of control over the graphic layout of the page. All right. The same concept, but at the letter level, you can put a lot of space between the letters of a word. This gives you a real stretched out feeling. 50 is probably a little bit too much. So let me go ahead and change this down to 20. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to reload that. And you can see now, instead of the space being between the words, it's actually within the words and there's space between each letter. again, gives you kind of a fun, or you can squish them together to give it a more severe look if you want. You can do the same thing with the line height. You can increase or decrease the amount of space between the lines of text. This is similar to double spacing maybe in Word. So I'm going to do this on our paragraph. I'm going to go back to doing an online style. And again, I'm going to go ahead and measure this in pixels, but you do have other options. I'm going to go ahead and add the style, change the line height property, and let's increase it significantly. Let's put 40 pixels between there. So I can save this, go back to my page, reload it, and remember I did this on the paragraph, so watch that. And notice that I increased my spacing. This can be useful. Again, you can do it for design decision reasons, but you also can do this to make your page more readable. If you have, if you're designing for an older audience, maybe if you have large blocks of text and want to make it more readable, then you actually might want to increase the line height between those so it appears more double spaced, if you will. All right, we're almost done. We just have a couple more. We're going to go back to our page, and we're going to do something that I know a lot of you have probably wanted to do to this point. We are going to center something. So we're going to go to our H1. I'm going to take out our letter spacing just to make it more, we can see the effect of our centering a little bit better. We're going to use the text align property. You have left, right, and center. So in this case, let's go ahead and center our text, and I'm going to go quickly through this because you've seen centered text 100 times in your life. But now welcome to my page is centered. All right, one last one I want to show you before we end this section is a text indent. This is one thing that people really like about CSS because you can't do what I'm about to do with HTML. A lot of us, we've been taught by our English teachers that the first paragraph or the first line of a paragraph is indented, and if you want to do that in HTML, easiest way to do it on the paragraph here, I'm going to use text indent, and again you can give it in pixels or points or inches, whatever you want to do, but I'm going to go ahead and just indent my paragraph 30 pixels. I'm going to save that, and as you might suspect, it's going to indent the first line of our paragraph and give it a little bit more of a print appeal. So those are the main styles you might use when you're working with text. In the next one, we're going to talk about margins and borders, and then we'll move on to backgrounds.